Good morning, dear friends. I welcome you in this wonderful class of language. Today, let us try to understand a very short poem by Elizabeth Jennings. The poem is titled as Father to Son and it is meant for 11th class students. Dear friends, it is in your book Hornbill. The poem has just four stanzas and is based on the theme of generation gap. Generation gap, as you know, you have now understood generation gap in class 10th as well. And there's again one more thing which you have to keep in consideration, that is the agony of a father. You are finding father's anguish, father's anguish towards his child. Now, the first two stanzas are obviously displayed on your screen. Now, here is I don't understand this child, though we have lived together now in the same house for years. Now, the father and the child who live together for so many years in the house, but still, father does not understand his child. This is how the poem begins, and at the same time, you will find in these lines the anguish of a father towards his child, and some agony is prevailing. And then he says, I know nothing of him. So try to build up a relationship from how he was when small. Now, very interesting lines. I know nothing of him. He fails to understand, his child. He says, I know nothing of him. Just like, he is considered to be a remote child, a child whom he knows nothing. Then what is his desire? Is to build up a relationship from how he was when small. When the child was very small, at that time, there is a cordial relationship between a father and a child. He is basically longing for that particular relationship, where he understands his child. He is in fact recollecting when child was very small. Now this time he's a grown up. That's why there is some bitter relationship, between father and the child. Now in this first stanza, you can easily understand the relationship between a father and a child is bitter, and they are not considered to be, cordial at all, because the child is now grown up, he has his own world, he wants to do the things on his own, and that's why I said this particular poem is based on generation gap as well. Then see another stanza. Yet have I killed the seed I spent or sown it, where the land is his and none of mine. We speak like strangers, there is no sign of understanding in air. This child is built to my design, yet what he loves I cannot share. Again, in this particular stanza, we came to know that father and the child, they are speaking just like the strangers are talking to one another. There is communication gap between the two. They do not speak just like, a father and a child. They are speaking just like strangers are talking to one another. and he's surprised to see. He says, the seed I spent or sown, you can understand here, do something which will bring a result. He fails to get the result. The land is his own, and that result, that outcome of the relationship at this point when the child is grown up is not cordial at all. They are speaking like strangers, and then he says that there is no sign of understanding in there. There is no understanding between them. Although what happens, this child is built to my design. He knows the child is built to my design. Yet what he loves, I cannot share. But the problem is, the child is built to his design, to father's design. But what he loves, what child loves, the father didn't understand. He fails to understand what he loves, what are his likes, what are his dislikes. He didn't understand anything. That is how you are finding that in stanza second you didn't have the cordial relationships. And now see another stanza. Silence surrounds us. I would have him prodigal, returning to his father's house, the home he knew, rather than see him make and move his world. I would forgive him too, shaping from sorrow a new love. Prodigal is, the word that exists in line 2 of the third stanza. Now, it is simply what is called spendthrift, a person who is spending money freely. The father says that silence surrounds us. We don't talk to each other. There is silence that is prevailing there among them. I would have him prodigal, returning to his father's house, the home he knew. His child had been prodigal. He is a spendthrift. And he wished that he must return to his father's house. The child is not there. He is now adult one. Now he has left the place. He is somewhere else. That's what the father, says. He wishes that the child should return to his own house, and that particular house which he is familiar with when he was a child, when he was in childhood age, rather than see him make and move his world. And he wishes him that he should be at home rather than to move outside, to move to some another place, or to have some another house. The child, he the father desires that his child should be in his own house, the house where he is brought up, the house where he is nourished. He did not wish that his child would move to some other place and he will have his own another house somewhere else. I would forgive him too. Now, because of the bitter relationships, now the father, clearly says, I would forgive him too, shaping from sorrows a new love. Okay, there have been bitter relationship between the two, and he want to forget those bitter relationships. And that are the basis of sorrow, between the two. And he want to develop a new relationship, the relationship based on you know good conditions, where heart to heart contact will prevail. That's what he wishes. He wishes that he want to forget each and everything. He want to forget all those bitter conditions that were prevailing between the two. And now he want to have, a new relationship based on love, new relationship based on affection, new relationship based on understanding between the two. And then comes the last stanza. Father and son, we both must live on the same globe and the same land. He speaks. I cannot understand myself why anger grows from grief. We each put out an empty hand, longing for something to forgive. Now, the last and the final stanza here, the child speaks, the son speaks. Now, what he says, that is interesting. We both must live on the same globe and on the same land. Now, he again wishes that we must live on the same globe, in the same house, with, good, what you say, good conditions prevailing. There must be, cordial relationship between the two. And he speaks, I cannot understand myself. Now the child says, I cannot understand myself. That is interesting. Now he cannot understand himself. Why? Anger grows from grief. Anger grows from grief, right? And it is basically, grief on which, he is finding some sort of anger that develops, that arises because of grief, because of sorrow. He feels sad and he becomes angry. And he says, he did not understand. He does not understand himself why this happens. Although he is himself trying to have good relationship with his father. We each put out an empty hand, longing for something to forgive, right? Both are ready to forgive one another. Both are ready to forgive one another and have good relationships. Yet what happens? Yet both are at what you say, at a different places. Both are at a different place. Both do not share the same thing. But there is something in them, in their heart of hearts, to forgive each and everything, to forgive all those bitter and what you say, worse relationships between them. And they want to develop in new relationships. Yet they are not possible at all. That is how, this particular poem ends. That's why we find when the son is as child, at that time what happens, he is having a very good relationship with his father. But after his growth, when he becomes adult, there is a generation gap. When there is a generation gap between father and the son, obviously what happens, they do not share the same thing, they do not share the same you know ideas. Obviously there is a lot of problem, what you say, the understanding problem between the two. Because of this misunderstanding, there is the difference. That is the total thing the poet wants to convey through this particular poem. Okay, boys and girls, I believe you have understood it now properly. Okay, let us see it is, other areas in the upcoming lectures. Goodbye.